Hey team, it's Grace from Graceful Bricks. And today I wanted to talk to you about Pride. It's June, which is traditionally Pride Month. And what a big thing that's really exciting for me is that today I was featured on Lego's website. That's right, the company itself featured me and some other great adult fans of Lego and talked about our experiences being members of the LGBTQ IQQA2S community. Let's just break that one down for a second. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans is the LGBT. Q is for queer or questioning. LGBTI intersex. QQ, queer or questioning. A does not stand for allies. We love our allies, but if you're an ally, you obviously can't be part of the group, right? It's like the difference between being a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs and being a Toronto Maple Leaf, right? Different people, different classes, different groups. And so A stands for asexual. Hairs everywhere. LGBTIQQA2S, Two Spirit. Two Spirit is a term that a lot of Indigenous or First Nations groups use to talk about their historic relationships and current relationships. But they have a long history of two-spirited peoples, people who are both male and female. And in a lot of those communities, actually, they were well respected and seen as someone who had a foot in both worlds. Similar to how maybe there might be a village elder or like a priest or a shaman or somebody who had more connections with different worlds. So that's the breakdown of what that long acronym means. Now, there's other groups, obviously, that are part of the LGBT community. Myself, I identify as pansexual. So obviously, there's no P in there. So the LGBT really, rather than being prescriptive acronym, is more like a descriptive. So it's not if you aren't listed, you're not part of the community. That's not it. That's a prescriptive one. It only includes these groups. Descriptive means we try to describe everyone possible, but obviously there's going to be people that don't fit in perfectly. And that's fine because you're still welcome. It's a big group and a lot of people, and everyone's welcome. So I was featured on the Lego Group's website, and I will put a link to that in my little description of the video, so you can click on that and you can go check it out. I will tell you, some people have been having issues clicking through. If you do, I think it gives you the option of like playing games on the Lego website, or like going to the shopping corporate side of things. I think you have to go to the corporate side of things, and not the games. If you have issues, message me and I'll see if I can help you out. But so that's exciting. It's also brought up, got me thinking, you know. So I don't typically talk a lot about my history as a queer person, but I thought that this video would be a good time to do that, especially given that it's Pride Month, to talk about my own story. So for me, I was assigned male at birth, and I was raised male Um, and uh, I I knew I knew that I was bisexual at a young age. I definitely knew by the time I was getting into like middle school and certainly by high school, secondary school. I knew that I liked boys and girls equally. It didn't really bother me. But I grew up in rural Ontario, Canada, and um, that there weren't at the time. So I was in secondary school in the late '90s, early 2000s, which isn't that long ago. And actually, Canada legalized same-sex marriage in that period. Uh, but it was still a hard sell for the culture. The culture, society as a whole, hadn't come around to the idea of gay people. Um, Ellen came out when I think I was in like middle school. Um, Brokeback Mountain came out while I was in high school. And these things started the discussion and started people moving. And certainly in larger urban centers, there were already strong queer communities. But there was nothing like that in a rural area. In Ontario, actually, we have in the various schools, we have gay straight alliances, which are it's kind of like a club, um, or any sort of group of students that are interested in something. And it is a place for people to go and to seek support, and it's a place for for students who identify as LGBT, and their friends and their allies. And it's a often started or gets going because there's a teacher who is willing to take on and who may identify as LGBT themselves, but who certainly is an ally and wants to create a safe space at the school. And those are fantastic. I've had the good luck of being able to talk at several of those, to bring my Lego, to talk about my story. Um, but yeah, so growing up, um, there were no. I didn't know anybody who was gay. I just didn't. I didn't know anybody who was queer. I didn't know anybody who was bisexual or pansexual, even though I knew myself I was. And a lot of the kids around me knew that I was different, and often teased me for it, and I got a lot of. There was certainly a struggle. It was hard. There were definitely times where it was very hard. I remember my grade 7, 8, 9, and 10 years were really rough. I was lucky. I found a new group of friends in grade 10, 11, and that made all the difference. And so, to any students, teenagers, young people watching this, find your clique, find your group, find your people that you mesh with and that are safe for you. And it doesn't have to be big. Honestly, like, I think my close friends, I had one best friend, and then I had probably a handful of people that I spent a lot of time with. Um, it was small. It was less than a dozen. And then I had a larger group of people that, I enjoyed spending time with, but they weren't like my core people. Um, then I went to university, and in university, I really opened up about a lot of things. Like you do. University and moving out on your own is a great chance to really become who you are. And for me, throughout high school and everything, I'd been outgoing but very conscientious, A square, totally a square. Um, and and I was very academic. Um, I did I was very academic. And when I got to university, I realized that a lot of my academic push hadn't been from me. It had been from my parents and expectations around performance in certain classes, and in fact, all my classes. Um, so, so when I got to university, I was able to sort of explore and do more things, and I I wouldn't I came out as bisexual. Everyone knew that I was bi. I don't think I ever really sort of stood up somewhere and was like, "Hey, everyone, um, I'm I'm queer." And at that time, I definitely wouldn't have used the word queer. It was still very much a slur. Uh, but my partner, my first wife, who I met in university in my second year, and we were together for 10 years after that, she certainly knew that I was bisexual and later identified as pansexual. Um, and for me, I just sort of looked at him and was like, hey, I fell in love with this beautiful woman um, who very easily could have been a beautiful man. And and my friends around me all sort of accepted that. Um, for me, the big coming out experience was when I came out as transgender, and I didn't even know what transgender was. In fact, when I think back on it, the only time I ever heard the term transgender, because I can now look back through those memories and look for things, was at church a church conference. Both my parents were United Church ministers, which is one of the more progressive and liberal churches in Canada. The United Church was the first church to start performing and blessing and marrying same-sex people, um, and so that was, good. But I remember at this conference, they were all the various committees were giving their year-end reports, and one of them was the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and the LGBT community. And somebody got up in the audience and said, we're familiar with the idea of lesbian and gay and bisexual, but what's this transgender thing? Um, and that was my mom. um, and so I wonder if she had an inkling, and I wonder if my parents had an inkling that there was something different about me, and I wasn't exposed to anything. Um, I should add, when I was in university, I lived in a residence that was run by the Mennonite Church of Canada. So I went from being raised by two ministers to living in a Christian Mennonite college. So they weren't really necessarily the most open and understanding about LGBT issues, although now they totally are, and they're fantastic, and I really support them, and they've done some great changes, and sort of an about face. So props to you, Conrad Grable, University College in Waterloo. Well done, but you still have more to go. Just saying, there's always room for improvement. So for me, it was several years into my marriage. I had two lovely kids. I love them to bits. I still love them to bits. My wife and I were doing great. And then I just sort of one day, I think I saw a news story on CBC about transgender people, and I went down the rabbit hole, the internet rabbit hole. And I knew as soon as I started reading about transgender that was who I was. That was the piece that I'd been missing all my life. that I had tried to figure out, but never really succeeded. Um, in the article for Lego, I say that I finally sort of understood why I had all the pieces I had. You know, if you imagine a Lego box, and but I never saw the box or the instructions. I just had all these pieces, and I tried to cobble them together into like me. And then finally, I saw the box, and I was like, "Oh, I'm transgender. Okay, now it makes sense why I have all this stuff here." And I could finally figure it out. So I talked to my partner, and we worked on it for a number of years, trying to figure stuff out. My first wife is still incredibly supportive and a wonderful ally, and is doing a marvelous job raising my two beautiful girls, and I'm couldn't have picked a better um, person, and she really was wonderful and supportive the whole way through. But at some point, we realized that um, I wanted to be more of a woman than she was comfortable being in a relationship with, given that she was straight. You know, there's only so far you can bend. Um, so we broke that relationship off, and um, that was hard. That was really hard. At the same time, my mental health was really bad, and I think the two were definitely connected. Um, the other factor was that it was really hard on a lot of my social relationships. Um, my two best friends, who I still love and adore and would drop anything to go visit and to hang out with, um, we didn't talk for a few years. And I don't think it was anything that was ever said per se. It was just awkward. And so we just didn't. Um, Obviously, I didn't get to continue hanging out with my in laws, who were awesome and accepting and had LGBT people in the family already, so it was less of an issue. Um, Unfortunately, my family was not very understanding. Um, my parents, it began the end of my relationship with my parents. Um, to this day, I don't really talk to them, um, and I don't know them at all now, and they don't know me at all either. And so it's really hard to rebuild a relationship when you don't know the people at all. Um, my brother was supportive, and my grandmother, bless her heart, was wonderful as well. And I continue to see my grandmother whenever possible. Um, but a lot of the things, you know, I lost my job, um, lost my parents. I It felt a lot like I lost my kids, and I definitely lost my best friend and my partner. Um, so I lost a lot in that period, and there was a lot of mourning that went on at the time. That, you know, a lot of people, when they heard that I was transgender, they almost had like this sad face on, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey," like as though I said, you know, I have cancer. Um, and it wasn't a bad thing being trans. It's not bad to be transgender. For me, I felt like, wow, I had discovered this really important part of myself, and wasn't that exciting? And you know, I could finally come out and be who I was. So I wanted to celebrate, and there were a lot of people wearing all black for Graham. That was my previous name, Graham. Um, so yeah, I lost a lot. I worked really hard to rebuild a good community, and being part of the queer community has definitely been a part of that. Being a proud out ally, and talking with people and sharing my experience. I think it's a lot better now for young people coming out as LGBT. Um, I think it's a lot better than it was certainly when I was a teenager and starting to explore who I was sexually. I think there's more openness, uh, but the risk is still there that your family's not going to get it. That um, you're going to lose people, friends or relatives, um, or that you're going to be silenced and told, well, just don't dress normal. Don't talk. Don't bring your partner with you to see grandma at Christmas. It'll just confuse grandma, right? I got that a lot, and actual fact, grandma had no issues. Um, yeah, so moving beyond that, my transition, gender wise, physically, um, I changed my name legally, and so now I'm legally Grace, and I love that, and I was really happy with that. Getting on hormones took for frickin' ever. Um, I am grateful that they are covered by the Ontario Disability Support Program, which I am on. I am on um, welfare, basically. I'm disabled. And I am glad that they are covered because I could not afford them. Otherwise, they are very expensive. But it took a long time. I remember it took me 6 months to get the referral to an endocrinologist who could deal with my hormones. And I went to the appointment. And I was really excited, and they met me for about 20 minutes. They talked to me a little bit, and they said, well, come back once you get your blood work done. I was like, you couldn't have told me you needed blood work before the appointment? So I had to go and get blood work, and then I had to book a follow-up appointment, which was another 6 months away. And they didn't like my blood work. So I had to go and change some of my diet and change some of my antidepressants that I was on so that they would feel comfortable in my hormones. So it took me over about 14 months to go from yes, I would like um, to change my physical appearance. Keep in mind, I had already considered this for 3 years. So from the point that I went to a doctor and said it's time to start doing this, it took another 14 months. So it took me about 4 years before I really even started to physically transition. I'm on hormones. I will continue to be on hormones the rest of my life. I take estrogen. I took a testosterone blocker for a long time, but I had surgery to remove my testes. Yes, this might be TMI, but I think you're all adults and you can deal with it. I had them removed. They were a source of pain, dysphoria, and they weren't doing anything. I already had my kids. I was like, what do I need these things for anymore? I'm just blocking the hormones. So I got rid of them last summer in Toronto. And as a result, I don't have to take my testosterone blockers anymore, which is really great because it puts less of a load on my liver and kidneys overall, and I can take less estrogen, um, which means that I'm at a lower risk for osteoporosis. So, helpful all around. At this point, I'm done with my physical transition. I'm just going to maintain for the rest of my life. I'm telling you all this because I'm comfortable speaking it. This is not stuff you should ever ask a trans person. Just like you should never ask their dead name, the name that they were born as, that they no longer use or identify as. You should never ask that. You should also never ask about their genitals. I always say, I have a couple things I say, which is, unless we're actually planning on you having an interaction with my genitals today, there's no reason you need to ask about them. I also will tell people that, sure, I'll describe it for you, but could you go first? Typically, people stop at that point. They go, oh, you're right, it is inappropriate to ask about this from somebody who I don't know very well. So, there's that. Some of the other parts of being trans really suck. Just total honesty. The statistics on being trans in Canada are that typically they are more educated than the general population, i.e. they have a bachelor's degree. Check. They struggle with mental health and have tried to end their life several times. Check. They are unemployed or on disability or social services in some way. Check. Also, and I'm not going to go into it here because I don't want to right now, but one of the few job opportunity areas that they have access to is sex work. Check. Been there. Also, we're discriminated against and have a greater chance of being assaulted physically and sexually. Check. I've had some very unpleasant encounters. Yeah. So, but a lot of this was talking about pride, and I think that going forward, things are getting better. There's more understanding. There's more inclusion. There's more, not just even accepting diversity, but celebrating diversity, looking for it, actively seeking it, and that's key, and just phenomenal. Yeah. I don't know what else I can possibly add. If anybody has any questions, feel free to post them. Questions. I won't get offended over most of them unless you want me to get offended. Like, if you're trying to offend me, I will get offended and I'll probably delete your comment. But if it's genuinely meant as, hey, I have this question, cool. I have no issues talking about most of this stuff. Yeah. I can't think of anything else to add. So I am going to do another video immediately after this one, and I'll post it a day later. And it's going to be about this out of my head sculpture, which talks about being trans. So I wanted to discuss that one and share it with you all. So thank you all for listening. I really, really appreciate it. And if you know someone that's queer or LGBT, give them a hug. Pride Month is a mixed bag. Um, we're all supposed to celebrate during this month, but there's honestly been a lot of really big struggles in our community. Um, we don't celebrate Pride Month uh, because it started as a party. It started as a riot. It was a street riot um, at Stonewall Inn because the police came in and started busting people up and arresting people, and the queers just said, "No, I'm tired of this. This is not okay." And unless you think it didn't happen in Canada too, we also had stuff happen in Canada. Look up information about the bathhouse raids. Happened in the 80s. I was alive. Um, and they raided and arrested hundreds of young men in Toronto at the bathhouses. The Toronto police literally destroyed these meeting places for gay people. And they were doing nothing wrong. This was after Trudeau said that government has no place in the bedroom in Canada. The Toronto police disagreed, and they arrested people, held them with no charges, and then often cases they would post their names in the newspaper so that you would lose your job, so your family and friends would know, and so that you were outed without your consent. Yeah, this is what our what Pride Month was based on. This is our history, and so when I see Pride Month getting people just as a party, it's not. We had to fight for this space, and when you consider the AIDS crisis that happened and all the thousands upon thousands of men who died, young gay men in their 20s, in their 30s, there's an entire generation missing, and it didn't need to be that way. We've seen how quickly this past year you can create treatment for a virus. It took decades, and all the time, gay men were dying. So Pride Month is a time to celebrate. It's a time to be out, to share who we are, and not to hide. But at the same time, it's also a time to remember where we came from and what we lost along this way to get to where we are. So I'm very proud to be LGBT, to be a member of the queer community, and thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, hit a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, post them, and stay beautiful, stay fabulous. I love you all. Hugs, and have a great day. Thanks.